everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. It's 1 o'clock here on the West Coast. I'm here in California working at a customer site, actually doing kind of cool stuff. But meanwhile, every day we have our FileMaker live training, which is awesome. It's a great opportunity for us to get some of the smarter people in the FileMaker community together where we can discuss great things, learn great things. Frequently, I'm the one doing the learning. And so I'm always excited to have awesome people here who are much smarter than myself, which is the whole goal. So this is, if you go to fmtraining.tv, you can press the left tab and it comes up with our upcoming broadcast schedule. This is driven, HTML page is driven through the FileMaker Data API. And so this is live data out of our FileMaker database. So let's go, Margaret, why don't we go to the right tab right here. So if you go to fmtraining.tv, click the button right there. If you do a quick sign up with us, you will get an email that allows you to visit this page right here. And so what we have here is a collection of all of Leland's most awesome training moments. So this is kind of a dedicated landing page for JavaScript/JSON. So Leland lately has been covering JSON basics. Today, I guess, is going to be kind of a new basics section on post-person application usage for creating and shooting off and managing API integrations directly. So, but if you want to come to this page, this is awesome. If you scroll down the bottom of the page, I highly recommend that you check out, once again, all the free content. At the very bottom is some paid material if you want to learn how to build React Native applications for your FileMaker file and deploy it onto like an Android device. People keep saying, and I saw it the other day with Claris, when are we going to get an Android version? Let me help all of you on the internet. There is no ever going to be an Android version of FileMaker Go. Any questions?
Yes. Is there ever going to be an Android version? I just wanted to
I swear.
Check.
Well, here's the deal. The difference is that here on this channel, no, it's Apple computer. They're not going to support Android. Okay. Apple doesn't like Android. Android could kiss its. So I will answer honest questions honestly. I will answer honest questions honestly. I will answer questions honestly, unless Leland pays me to lie, then I will lie vigorously on his
I prefer
behalf.
you answer honest questions dishonestly.
That needs to be written on the side of a mug. I think that would be great. So anyway, so Leland, if you want to support the channel, that's how you support him. Purchase his training. It's really great stuff. If you go to fmtrain.tv back to the top, you can see the bundles button. That's how you purchase and support the channel. So anyway, okay, cool. So Leland, what are we talking? Well, post-person. We're talking about post-person, and then are you going to walk us through this at a kind of a basic level? What are we doing today?
Well, the last few days we've been dealing with the last several weeks, the last few classes that I've held here. The last 3 in a row have been working with APIs of some sort. So the first time we did execute DataAPI with FileMaker scripts. Then we've been playing around with the data API from external, and we've been playing around with cURL options and how to make all of that work, and including from one FileMaker server talking to another one within scripts dealing with APIs. So that's all well and good, but as you know, when we were dealing with cURL and with generating queries for the data API, we had to manually create the JSON payload. We had to manually create the cURL options. And so, yes, in answer to some people's questions out there, yes, there's tools that can aid you in this process, and that's what we're looking at today. A tool called PostMan, and it helps us beta test or manipulate or try to figure out how to work with an external API. And then once we get that successfully working in PostMan, we can transfer that information into FileMaker that much easier. All right, so I will share a screen here, figure out which button does what. Okay. So this is just a browser pointing to www.postman.com. And Margaret will probably be sharing that in the chat for those of you that would prefer a copy and paste. And this is the main landing page for PostMan. Again, this has nothing to do with FileMaker or anything else. It's simply a tool out there that anyone can use. And as you can see here on the left-hand side, they support both. They support all 3, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux operating systems. So this can be your tool of choice in either of those environments. And you just download the product and get started, and I will bring my copy up, and it'll look something like this. Now, today, obviously, consider this to be Postman 101 for FileMaker developers. That would be kind of the official title if you want to give it one. Now, I say Postman 101 because there's a lot of this app that I've never used. There's a lot of things that it can do. There's probably some amazing things that I've never explored that someday I might bump into or watch someone else do and use it myself. But today we're just going to focus on a real basic usage of the app that's going to aid us in our FileMaker world. So a basic glance around what you're staring at on the screen. On the far left, you have a set of menu options maybe, or categories. And then over here, since I've selected collections, this is a list of my collections. On when you first install it, that's going to be empty. Over here, you have it's kind of like a detail view. This is currently selected, so that's what we're seeing here in this upper screen on the right, and then down below is our response. So this is the basic area that we're going to work in. And if you're starting fresh, what you'll want to do is click this new button and create a new collection. And I'll just go ahead and do that myself here, new collection. I'm just going to give it a name of live stream, just so I can see what we've created. And you'll see over here on collections that I've created a new one here that's currently, if we expand that, it's currently blank. It even tells us this collection is empty, add a request to start working. So that's what we'll do next. We'll hit the new button, and this time we'll do a new HTTP request. So now you see it here on the left. Well, no, you don't. I created a new request, but I haven't saved it yet. So it has not added it to a collection yet. So right now I have a blank untitled request, very similar to a new blank document in Word text editor. And you'll notice that we have a place to insert our URL. We have a series of tabs here for what we would consider to be things like cURL options, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And over here on the left, we get to pick which HTTP request we want. And the most common one that we're going to start with is just a GET request. We'll use POST a little later, but some of these other ones may or may not look familiar. So I'm just going to type in the same thing that we did last week with cURL options. I'm just going to put in a call just to an immediate web page, not even an API, just a web page. And I'm just going to pick my default here of apple.com. And without setting any parameters or any extra options, I'm just going to hit send and see what happens. And it's done. The first thing I want you to pay attention to is right here under my mouse cursor, which is approximately 2/3 the way across the screen and about halfway down, and it says status 200 OK. This is your standard response for successful HTTP requests. So if you're ever dealing with IT and you're dealing with APIs and you're dealing with customer service, a common question is well, what status did you get back? Did you get back a 401? Did you get back a 503? What was the status code you came back with? And 200 typically means it was successful. It communicated with the server gave a response, and sometimes this response can actually be empty and still be successful. So that's why I like to point that out right out of the gate, because if you stare down here at the response and it's blank, you might get the erroneous feeling that nothing's worked correctly when really it actually might have. So that's all based upon the server. So in this case, we got back our 200 OK, and this is what we got back. But this is what has been brought back to us in a pretty format. And you notice these options here that Postman gives us. I'm going to change this to raw, and suddenly it's going to look blank. And again, it's like, uh-oh, did something break? No, it didn't. And if you recall from when we did this last week, if I start to scroll, that's when it starts to become obvious, oh, we've got a lot of blank space floating around in there, right? So if I can continue to scroll, you'll notice the scroll bar on the right is just barely moving, and that's a nice visual indication that we got back a ton of data. So if I scroll through that very fast, you'll see, whoa, that is the entire initial web page for currently, at this particular moment, for apple.com, okay? And we just got back HTML, and that's what's expected, isn't it? We did an HTTP request for apple.com, so the web server is going to give us back HTML that normally in a browser would be rendered to what you're used to seeing in a browser, okay? But as you're getting familiar with API calls and cURL options, you'll notice that you can get back other things besides HTML. Okay, so that's kind of our first step, and I would consider that to be the hello world of Postman. If you can do those steps and follow along exactly with what I did and get this expected response, then you're absolutely where you need to be in order to continue with the rest of the content. So hopefully nobody's fallen asleep, and if so, Richard just needs to scream really loud so that we wake them up.
I can do that. We'll just start a helicopter in here, and then it'll get real loud real fast. So yeah.
All right. So before we move on to the next section, I want to bring up kind of a subsection here. I'm going to bring up the terminal just to scare everybody to death, because we all know that terminal is a scary beast. And
it sucks.
And last week, you saw that we typed in a few things directly in terminal. Well, going back to Postman, there's this little magic button over here on the far right, and it looks like a ending tag for HTML. It's just it's not a square bracket. I think it's just a bracket, right? Just a little minus sign. Is that just a standard bracket? If you click on that, it will reveal a pop-up snippet on the right. And look at what comes up. Now it took me a long time using Postman before I stumbled across this, and wow, it's powerful. If I click this little download menu, you can probably guess without me saying a thing what's going on here.
It's a library of code nuggets of code you can use.
It's even better than a library. So for over here on the left, I put in a GET request for apple.com with no additional parameters. And I've selected curl, and look at what it gives us. It gives us the literal curl command to do the same thing in curl. And so if I change this to JavaScript for jQuery, it gives me the code to do this exact API call in JavaScript using jQuery. It's literally creating the code for you. If I switch it to PHP using curl, look at that. I mean, I've had to do that by hand and struggling in libraries and everything else. And I did that for quite a long time before I discovered this little gem hidden away in Postman. So what I'm going to do right now, just to show you examples, go back to curl. I'm just going to select this entire thing and paste it in the terminal without typing a thing. See what we get? We get back the exact same thing.
So which one did you select over there? Was there one called terminal? Is that what it was called?
No, I selected curl because in terminal, like we did last week, we hand typed in a curl command. So this was the curl command right here, which you can put into terminal.
So the terminal can take straight curl commands is what we're saying.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So curl is a utility program, and we passed in all of these parameters. Now you'll notice last week we probably just typed in something similar to this minus the location and minus the header. So Postman included a few additional optional things that, we didn't do by hand last week. But anyways, we did that in terminal. Look at what we got. We got back exactly the same thing. So bear that in mind, because from now on, everything I do in Postman, I'm going to turn around and do in curl in the terminal, and you'll start to hopefully see the value in it. So I'm going to close that back up and move to the next item. So before I move to the next item, let's take a look at last week's solution, just the script editor. Oh, we got dark mode in there. Sorry, but we won't stay here very long, Margaret. Don't panic. So I'll make this a little smaller. I'm going to go to the next one, which was Slack. If you all remember last week, I'm going to bring Slack back up. Where are you, Slack? You're right about, oh goodness. Do I have it running? I don't. Bear with me.
You have
too
many icons is what that's
I got a
called.
few. Okay, so here's my Slack channel. Here's my IT department. And last week, you can see all of the messages that I created and some of our viewers created and sent to my Slack channel here. So going back to the code, this is the code that we did in order to generate that. And what did we do? We provided it with a URL that we got from Slack, and then we created a JSON payload with two key value pairs. The first one was text and then the message. The second one was channel, and then that's our recipient, which in this case was the hashtag IT department. And our curl options was to post, and we included one header, which was content type application JSON, and then we provided our JSON payload as a data parameter. So all of that, if you were with us last week, looks totally familiar. And so let's do that in Postman. So I'm going to create a new HTTP request. This is a post instead of a GET. I'm going to copy that URL from my solution last week, paste it in here to the URL. I'm going to get rid of the double quotes on either side. So now you can see we have a post. There's the full URL. Now let me just hit send right now. Let's see what happens if we just send it this way. here's what we get back from Slack. We get back an invalid payload. Okay, but you notice that here I'm building it and I'm playing with it and I'm testing it while I'm building it. You can't really do that really too easily in FileMaker, right? You have to kind of go into Script Debugger and step through and look at the data viewer and all of that sort of thing. You can do it, it's fine, but this is a nice, useful tool to help you build your API connectivity to get the ending results that you want. And then once you have it all fine-tuned here, then you can easily move this, what you've done here, into FileMaker and not have to reinvent things or rethink about it. So that's kind of where we're going here. So keep that in mind while we continue. So I tried just a post command with just a URL and we get back an invalid payload. Well, as we know from last week, we had to put in a payload, right? And some curl options. Let's start with the payload. So here we've got parameters. Now parameters, if you're familiar with get commands, parameters are typically tacked onto the end of the URL, right after a question mark. So we're going to ignore parameters. We're going to ignore authorization for now. We'll get to that a little later. We're going to ignore header for a minute. We'll get back to that in a minute. But our post body, here's what we want. We want our body tab right here. And we got a couple different options. We've got none currently selected, okay? Well, let's put in some raw data. And what are we going to put in? We're going to put in JSON. So we needed two key value pairs. The first one was text, so I'm going to type in what's valid JSON. Remember, if you've taken my classes early on JSON, this should look familiar. Our key is inside double quotes, and we separate our key value pairs with a colon. And then my next entry is going to be whatever message I want to say. So I'm going to say, hello, FM training world from Postman. There. Now I'm going to end that key value pair with a comma and do one more key value pair, and this one is channel. And what's the value I want to use for that? Let's go copy and paste it from over here so we don't type it wrong. Paste. Oops, I got two sets of double quotes now. So let's narrow that back down to one. Okay, there is our JSON payload with two key value pairs, text and channel. Okay. Now, is there anything else we need? Yes, we need a curl option. Let's try Postman right now without doing that. It says okay, so it probably worked even without the header. So that kind of shows you, oh, that header, even though I thought it was required, might just be optional. Matter of fact, it probably figured it out by our payload. Our payload is JSON, so application JSON content type might have been inferred by the server. That would be my educated guess. Don't quote me on that. I don't know for certain. If we go back to chat, back to Slack, did it show up? Look at that. There, it came in right there. So we just posted a message in Slack from Postman using their basic API, and it's the same API that we did in FileMaker last week. So this we had to create in this particular format. We created a URL, a post body, we set some curl options, we did an insert from URL, and we got the same exact result last week, but we could have built it here in Postman first, right? And then gone and put it into FileMaker. So that's kind of why I'm showing you this tool and why we did curl options last week, because now we're going to be using them a little bit more this week. Now, if we use that hidden little tool over here on the right, look what Postman's created for us. Holy cow. I'm going to copy that, dump it into the terminal, paste. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the message. Instead of saying from Postman, I'm going to say from terminal. Matter of fact, I'll even put in Mac OS terminal just to be a little bit more specific. Okay, so now here's my curl command in terminal. Curl, there's the post, there's the URL. There's the header content type. Now this is saying text plain. I wonder if that's going to break anything. And here's our data raw, and there it is. Let's try it, see what we get. So it says okay. We'll go to Slack. There it is. So it worked just fine. So isn't that kind of cool? Postman works really nice and helps us create the URL. I mean the API particulars. But man, this little curl function over here is amazing, and we can get the same thing over in, hey, if I want to put this in a PHP page using curl, there's the code. It's already filled it all out for me. I just have to copy and paste that thing into a PHP page and call it good.
So code snippets. Code snippets.
Powerful feature of Postman for sure. Okay. So 2 down, we're posting messages to Slack. This is kind of fun, right? Our next one is, hey, let's talk with FileMaker Server. That's the next obvious one. So if you recall from last week, FileMaker Server, we're going to do it in 3 stages. The first one is getting a token. The second one is doing our query. The third one is going to be logging out, which is ditching our token so that we don't keep a connection hung in FileMaker Server, right? So we're going to do all 3 of those over here in Postman. So I'm going to create a new HTTP request. To get a token, it's a post. Now, of course, you can look at FileMaker's documentation to figure out what all is required, right? So from last week, I'm going to copy the URL and paste it in here. I'm going to get rid of the preceding and succeed. What is that? What's it trailing in? Using fancy adjectives and don't even know what I'm saying. Okay, I got rid of the trailing and leading double quotes. There we go.
Okay.
Now, what happens if I just hit send now? What does FileMaker Server come back with? It comes back with a valid message in JSON, but it's an error code, 1708. Okay, so we're already talking to FileMaker Server successfully, but now we need some particulars. We're not getting a token yet. And why do you suppose that is? Well, for one, it's saying, hey, you did not include content type. So that must be required here. It wasn't required in Slack, evidently. So let's go to headers. And here's where we need to put in our key value pairs for headers. So Postman will do some autofill for you from a value list, just like FileMaker will, so you don't have to hand type it in. Just start to type, and there's content type, so I'm going to select that. And then for value, I'm going to type in APP, and look at that. We've got predefined options, so we don't have to hand type it, and there's JSON. So now if we hit send, what do we get? We get, again, a successful message back from FileMaker, but now a different error code 10. And this one is, this one's kind of vague, but I'll tell you what it is. We're missing the empty object for the body. We're sending a post with no body. So if we change none to raw and put in our minimum required open curly brace, close curly brace, and now hit send, we still have a problem. So we still have something wrong. I need to figure out what I did wrong. Let's see, content JSON. Oh, I know what we did wrong. Authorization. We forgot to pass any credentials whatsoever. So we've got our appropriate header. We've got our appropriate URL. We have our post method. Everything is fine except for authorization is what we're missing. Okay, so let's look at that. And for authorization, Postman gives us quite a few options. Okay, including some obscure ones, some common ones. Well, FileMaker uses the basic auth, like a lot of APIs do, so I'm going to select that one. And here's where I can pass in credentials. Username and password. I can show the password if I wish. Now if I hit send, we get a token. Yay! Okay, now if we look at curl, and let's change our code snippet back to regular curl for the terminal, I can copy that, paste that into our terminal, and voila, look what we get back. There's our valid message from FileMaker Server, which includes our token. So I don't know if you've ever done it, but wow, in the terminal, you can sit there and talk to FileMaker Server and get a token back. I mean, you might or may not have ever tried that before, but it's certainly feasible, right? So there in Postman, we created everything that we need in order to get back a token. And you can see all the different pieces and parts. You can see with the green dots here that there is an authorization and there is a body, and the other ones are just empty. So Postman gives you kind of a little visual clue there.
So the 10 there means there's 10 headers in there? That's what we're doing, the 10 there?
Yes. Postman puts in a bunch of 9 hidden ones. So if we reveal the hidden ones, there's just a bunch of optional stuff that, you know, is a little technical but are not required.
Okay.
So it's kind of nice to turn those off. They can get a little confusing for sure. Good catch though. So one thing I guess I can point out here, some more things that are happening in Postman that you may or may not understand. Up here at the top, we have a series of tabs. These are kind of like browser tabs. These are the different ones that we've been, if you click between them, these are the different ones we've been creating and dealing with today. The little orange or red dot that you see trailing it means they've not been saved yet. So if you save them, you get to pick which collection you want to save them into. Right now I haven't saved them, so that's the reason for the dots. So now that we have a token, time for a query, right? So let's do a new HTTP request, and let's copy pretty much what we did last week, which is right here. So I'm going to select that URL and copy it over and paste it right there. Now here I'm going to remove a few things or change a few things. Actually, maybe I won't. Remember how I said it's kind of common in a GET request to have parameters at the end after a question mark? Well, look at what we have right here. We have a question mark underscore limit equals 500. You'll notice under parameters, Postman has automatically put that in for us as a key value pair for parameters. So that's how a parameter is passed. It's actually tacked onto the end of the URL, right? So Postman is splitting that out for you so that we can change it right here or do whatever we want. If we turn that off, you'll notice it disappears off the end of the URL. So if I turn that back on, boom, there it is. Okay. So in this particular request, I'm not doing a query for a specific record. I'm telling FileMaker Server, give me a list of all records, and oh, by the way, limit it to the first 500. Okay. So if we just do that right now to FileMaker Server, we're going to get back a valid response with the same code 10, which is, oops, we forgot to include authentication. Now, authentication, when you're not requesting a token, is a little different because now we have a token, right? Well, what do we do with it? Well, now we use the authorization type bearer token. And now we just have to paste that token right here into Postman's box. So if we go back to our previous tab, there's the token. I'm going to copy that, select it, copy it, and I'm just going to come over here, replace the current contents, and hit send. Oh my goodness, we got valid FileMaker data. Okay. And you notice it's already prettied up for us.
Yeah.
So now, just for giggles, let's go over and copy this cURL that Postman's automatically created for us and go paste that into the terminal. And look at that, we get the same thing, but not prettied up. All scrunched together in a very efficient, compact format. But it's working. So, I mean, talk about a quick way to all of a sudden use the terminal and cURL to be talking with FileMaker and do whatever you wish with it. Kind of a cool little side effect. That's why I'm showing it off. David says, if we're trying to get a token, why use post and not get? Because you have to post that empty body. The technicality for why you have to do that, you're right. It seems logical that you would do a get for a token, but I wonder if it's because it requires credentials. And a get, yeah, I'm not totally sure. There's a couple possibilities of answers for that, but the actual 100% accurate answer for that question, David, is proprietary Claris. Ask an engineer over at Claris. There's your answer. It's they chose to, and that's the restraint that we have. So hopefully that's not too coy of a response for you. But yeah, it was probably a design or a functionality restriction of some sort that caused them to end up with that. It is a little strange. I do agree. So now that we're getting data back from FileMaker, we should do the third option, which is our HTTP request. Change this to a delete. Go back to our script, copy our URL. This is getting to be old habit, right? So I'm doing this fast, but everybody should be following this just fine. Now you'll notice that this is not safe. This is straight from FileMaker. So we're going to append the token to the end of it. So I'm going to delete that trailing double quote and remove the leading double quote so that we just have this. Now, I tried putting the token in Postman's parameters. So let me grab that token to show you what I'm talking about. That was back here. There's the token. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to paste that as a parameter in here, and you'll notice it gets kind of weird. Number one, it adds a question mark, and according to FileMaker's delete for a token, you can't do that. So I just ended up having to just paste it right to the end. So no additional things, just delete the URL, paste the token at the end of it, hit send, and FileMaker comes back with it. Okay, it's gone. So that's our three stages for talking to FileMaker Server. Go ahead.
But the token is hard-coded in that URL. It's not dynamic, right? Not dynamically being swapped in. So
well, see, in FileMaker, we solved that here by just concatenating the variable token in with it. But in Postman, you just have to select it and paste in the current one.
So in Postman, we're just establishing that it works in general. Yes. And then we kind of take it and we hack it and drag it back into the script or wherever. We're probably in script somewhere in FileMaker. Okay, yeah, got it.
So with that, in Terminal and in Postman, we have talked to Slack. We have talked to FileMaker Server. We've gotten a token. And so really, if you look at these, once you get all the pieces and parts working, hopefully you can kind of see how you can go back and reverse engineer this and put it back into FileMaker, right? Because you'll know, okay, I need a parameter here for a limit. I need authorization to be bearer token. I don't need to have any headers. I don't need to have, a JSON payload body here in this particular get. So you can work from, once you get everything working here in Postman, you can take that same concept and go into FileMaker and put it in FileMaker-esque speak, right, into the script workspace. So in this particular case, I did it in reverse, right? We started with FileMaker because I already built it last week, and now we're putting it here into Postman. But you can do it in reverse just as easily, and that's how Postman becomes very useful. And my next example hopefully will help clarify that a little better. Okay, I'm gonna.
We have mostly commentary. I can read it out loud.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
There are Postman collections for FileMaker DAPI you can search for and add it to Postman. I use it every time I do FM DAPI work to make sure things are working. You can use environment variables for it if you want to instead, not to get ahead of things.
So everything he just said is FileMaker, is Postman 201 for FileMaker developers. Yes, there's a lot more functionality and a lot more streamlined workflow that you can do here in Postman. That's what he alluded to. Absolutely correct on all points. But I would say, please, when you're starting with Postman, follow along with what I just taught you, because as you all know, hand typing in your scripts in FileMaker to get things done is the best way to learn, rather than copy paste from a demo file or someone else's solution into your own code and using it. You don't learn very well until you start to type it in yourself. So for 101 students, get in the habit of typing it in and creating them from scratch, just like I did manually. And then once you get comfortable with it and you understand what's going on, do exactly what that person just recommended, which is go out there and look for a pre-existing FileMaker collection, which these are a list of collections here on the left. So what you can do is you can import collections that other people have made, and you get all of these things already built for you. And so all you have to do is play with them. So it's a wonderful and easy tool, and will help you streamline your workflow and working with APIs in FileMaker. Absolutely. Just, oh man, I just beg you, don't do it at first, because you won't learn. You'll end up with struggles and you won't know why, and so on and so forth. So great comment. What was the next one?
This is kind of like a question. This tool is great and it helps me a lot. I started to play with it a few days ago after 1 week trying to send SMS messages from FileMaker via MIC-ROTIC router without success. I think he's trying to say I figured something was wrong with Postman. The MIC-ROTIC API blocked me, and then he posted a thing.
I think what he's saying there, if I'm reading it correctly, I figured it out what is wrong with Postman. So I think he's complimenting Postman in the same way that I am, which is struggling to try to do something from FileMaker to another API solution. I wasn't getting success, tried it out in Postman, ironed out the kinks, got it to work in Postman, solved the problem. Now I can get it to work in FileMaker. And that's why I've experienced that myself, and that's exactly why Postman becomes an invaluable tool. Because you can do the, matter of fact, when you're working with external customer service and people to help you, and external vendors, if you talk to them in terms of Postman, you'll find commonality. If you try to tell them, well, I'm trying to do cURL options in FileMaker, they're going to go, huh, what? Right? So Postman is a very generally used tool out there working with APIs. So I've found that extremely invaluable with some of our vendors. Is I will have an error and a problem that I can't get past in Postman. I'll take it to their IT people at the vendor, and they will look at my Postman, tell me what I need to change in Postman. I will get it to finally successfully work. Now I can quietly, off of that phone call, make it work in FileMaker now. That makes a huge difference for problem solving.
I'm over here clapping. Yeah, it takes the conversation about FileMaker out of the conversation. And
absolutely.
Suddenly you're just dealing with generic API stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And APIs are fickle and finicky. So it's really easy to have problems and to have struggles. And if you can get it to work with other people's help that have no clue what FileMaker is, then that's instrumental in helping you figure out, just to get everything working right in Postman. Now you can do the conversion to FileMaker later and have much more success, less headaches for sure. So that was some serious work. We're going to transfer over to some play work. We've got about 4 or 5 API calls that I've been playing with over the last couple of weeks, and I think everyone should enjoy this. And it's just another example of, this is something that You haven't seen my work in FileMaker in this API realm, but now you're going to see it in Postman. And from what we do on Postman today, if you record it and try it on your own, you'll be able to probably convert it to FileMaker just fine. So at this point, we're going to put FileMaker off to the side. We're going to play in pure Postman with a new API that you may or may not have been introduced to. And we're going to have some fun in Postman doing some real simple basic API stuff. And the web page that we're going to start on is right here. OpenAI, ChatGPT. You've probably all heard of it. Before I get started, has anyone demoed any of this sort of thing on any of your live streams in the last few weeks?
Oh, we haven't done demo ChatGPT. A couple people play with it. One person sent me a sample file. He's probably here watching the show. I'm working 15 hours a day, so I haven't had a chance to play with the kind of the sample file he's playing with. I actually have a practical need. One of the things that we try to do with is make sure we have good outlines of what's in these videos, and it's always a hard time to get a good outline. So we've been trying on this project to, if you coerce the Chat GDP unit and say, hey, I need a summary of a video. First, it won't do it because it needs a permission, but then it actually can generate an outline of a video for you, which was pretty great. But we're doing it manually. We need a way of automating it. Would be really amazing.
Okay. Well, let's play with a little bit of API work using a few ChatGPT tools.
Yeah, let's do
that. For those of you not too familiar with it or want to play with it a little later, just go to openai.com and create a free account. And you get some free usage up to a certain amount per month, I believe it is. I think they give you $5 worth of a free tier to play with. And here's pricing when it gets a little further for each particular thing, how much each thing costs in the amount of tokens. And in your free account, you're going to need to go and view your API keys and create one. And once you create an API key, that will be what you use for credentials in Postman and FileMaker and everything else for your particular account. So you can see I've got an API key here that's mostly hidden, and that's going to be stored in my authentication section in Postman to tie that to my account and charge me accordingly, which I'm still on the free tier. So no worries, you can actually do a lot of work in there in the free tier, so don't worry too much about pricing. Just don't give your API key out to anyone, or suddenly your free tier is going to be gone. So
yes.
So once you have your API key generated, then you can look at documentation as far as what all is required, and it's very little that's required. So we're going to play around with this a little bit. So if I go back to Postman, the first one we're going to play with is one of their models that's called Text Da Vinci. We won't get into the particulars, but let me show you how simple it is. It's a post. It's this URL, tiny URL. Authorization is where you plop in your full access API key. And then this is your JSON payload, 3 key value pairs. The first is the name of their model. Max tokens gives kind of a limit to how deep you want it to do things. So you can leave that in or use defaults. But here's the prompt. I'm going to send to this simple little ChatGPT AI unit out there in the universe somewhere. I'm going to send it a post that says, hello, how are you today? So we're going to hit send. And you can see it's creating the request right here. And of course, free tier is slow. You don't have any priorities. So if you're into speed, you might want to actually pay for higher priority in their queue. But here's what we get back. I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see it in its entirety. And this is what we got back from this simple API. And you can see some basic information here. And really the only thing that we're interested in is right there. Here's the response from our little AI robot. And they simply replied, I'm doing well. That's it. No biggie. But you can see in Postman how I very quickly, without too much difficulty, created everything that was necessary and tried it, and I didn't get an error, and it came back with a status 200 OK. And of course, as you can probably guess, if I come over to here, I can copy the cURL and do that in the terminal as well, right? So there it is. And I probably got back the exact same. No, I got back a different response. This time he said, I'm doing great. Okay.
Just more comments. I used Postman to work out a Twilio interface for FileMaker. It was invaluable.
Excellent. So there's our first little play with a chat AI. let's move on to the next one. This one is a little bit of a newer model. This one's called GPT 3.5 Turbo. And it's also a post. It's a slightly different URL, same authorization, and our body is just a little bit more complicated now. We have 2 key value pairs, with the second key value pair being an array with 1 object in it, and that 1 object has 2 key value pairs. So a little bit more complex, but if you've been paying attention to my JSON classes earlier, this should not look confusing at all. And I'm going to ask a question in this particular one, and I'm just going to say, what can you tell me about FileMaker Pro? So let's hit send. And let's see what AI tells us about FileMaker Pro. We get a little bit bigger of a response back this time. Oh, we got some really long content. So I'll let you read that at your leisure. I'll just start off by saying FileMaker Pro is a cross-platform relational database application that allows users to easily design flexible and scalable databases for managing small to medium-sized businesses. And then it goes on from there. So, yeah, what do y'all think? Kind of fun. And of course, you can look in their documentation as far as more options to put in. You can put in things like temperature, which is a range of how random versus focused and deterministic you want the responses to be. I think you can pass in previous chat thread messages so that it can continue an ongoing conversation. That would be passing in even more information in the JSON payload. So again, lots of different options that you can do, all based on their documentation. So we have 3 more to do. I'll move on to the next one. This one's kind of fun. This is AI image generation based upon a theme. So in this particular example, I've built a post request with a new URL, a new payload, and I'm going to be asking for the AI to generate an image 1024 by 1024, and I want the theme to be a cow jumping over the moon, and I want them to give me back 2 images. Sound interesting? Bet you've never done this before to an API. Give me a picture of a cow jumped over the moon. Okay, send. What do we get? Well, of course, we're not going to get back an image, right? We're going to get back something. Base64 encoded something, or actually what we're going to get is we're going to get back a URL.
But that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that.
So there's our 2 images. So let's go see what we get. So in Postman, you notice if I just hover my mouse over this URL, it says to follow the link, just command click it. So I'm going to hit command click. And there's our first image generated by a computer of a cow jumping over a moon. One thing is immediately apparent, which is he's a damn better drawer than I am. Yeah, I don't think you would recognize my attempt at drawing a cow. I could do the moon. But,
so back up. Did it actually draw this, or did it go just steal it off the internet somewhere?
So
no, it's drawing it.
I've looked into it because I've got artist friends who are really into this, but it compiles images from all over the web, and it basically tags certain things, and then it molds it into a unique image by compiling stuff that people have already drawn. So whether it's drawing it itself or if it's just doing grand.
So time out. If I run the same request,
yes,
here in the same sequence to the same AI, am I going to get exactly the same picture?
Nope.
I've ran this about 8 times over the last 3 weeks. I get a different image every time.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first one. Let's look at the second one we got sent back because we requested 2.
That is exceptionally cursed.
So I'm going to hit send again. I'm just going to request a fresh set of 2. And here we go. Here's number 3.
He jammed it up to the cow.
And here's number 4.
That's funny.
So if you think that's wild, the next 2 get kind of interesting because you can submit images to have altered. So that's what we're going to do next. The next one is called image variation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this image off and ask for 2 variations on a same theme. And I noticed in Postman, this is kind of weird, even though I've got an image that I sent last time, you notice I got back a message that's an error. Image is a required property. So it looks like Postman, for some reason, is not correctly sending the same image that I told it to send last time, even though it shows here as a value. So I'm just going to delete that and reselect a file. And I'm going to, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little image right here. Right off of somebody's famous website here. So let's see what we get back with it. variation on a theme here.
Uh-oh.
And I'm going to put in a JPEG here.
If I'm wearing a bikini, there's going to be hell to pay for this, right?
So I'm going to put in a JPEG here and hit send just to show you this error that comes back that says upload an image must be a ping and must be less than 4 meg. So with that, I've already changed that in Photoshop really quick over to a PNG. Submit that. We're going to hit send, and we get back to image variations. He's looking nervous.
I am concerned. I am concerned. I am concerned.
All right. So drum roll, please. Here's the first one. And here's image number 2.
Oh, I look like Kyle Williams, like that one. Is Kyle here? Oh my God.
He is not, but.
Oh, okay.
I like seeing what it does to the RC logo.
So that was
it did. Yeah, it turned into like a Microsoft logo. Yeah, that's all right. Well, that's interesting.
So that is the image variation on this particular design, and you can see really what it did is it kept a lot of. I mean, it changed quite a few things, right?
I have much better teeth than that. Those teeth look like I'm some sort of hillbilly.
Well, what's interesting there is take a look at the collar. You have a colored collar that's different than your shirt there, and here it put it the same. And this one has a button. Yeah, so I mean, it changed quite a few things. The background, the shirt style, slight variation, the logo for sure. So it didn't just simply impose a different face on the same image, right? So this last one that I'm going to share with you is called image edits. And what you have to submit is an image with a mask and then give it a theme. So I'm going to put in here, Richard is celebrating his birthday today, and submit the same picture. Actually, maybe I can't because this requires a mask. I've already done this for my wife, so I'm going to go ahead and just revert that. And so this is going to be a picture of my wife, but it was just masked out. It was just a picture of just her, and I'll show it to you here. Select file, image. There's the basic picture. Okay. So I'm going to submit, not that one, but the masked version, which is, well, I thought I had it right here. There it is.
There it is.
You see the difference? So this is I've got the background all masked out. So I'm going to submit this image of just a headshot. Diana celebrating her birthday today. And I'm going to ask for 4 variations. So we're going to get back 4 images with that masked version, with variations on a theme of celebrating a birthday. Okay. So there's all 4 links. Here's the first one.
Okay.
Here's number 2.
Party hat.
Okay.
And number 3. And last but not least, number 4. So you can kind of see what it's doing. Obviously, it's keeping the masked image the same. It's not adjusting it like it did for the last one, which was a pretty drastic change, right? Yeah, now you notice her outfit is changing.
No, I did not notice that.
And it's also keeping her as a selfie or like a close-up shot instead of putting her in like a...
Right. So before, I mean, it was almost no shoulders or clothing showing, and so this is inserting quite a few variations, including angle of which she's sitting, right, for the picture. That one has one arm up, one arm down. So yeah, there's a lot of variation going on. So the takeaway here obviously is playing around and having fun with OpenAI, but it's also showing you that you can do this same thing with, in the terminal, copying cURL. You can post the same thing. You can write some JavaScript code. You can do some Node.js code. You can do some PHP code. And PostMan pretty much does most of the heavy lifting for you once you get the API to work correctly and not just get error messages. And then you can transfer the same information right over to FileMaker in reverse order of what we did at the beginning of the class. So good stuff. And that's all I've got for you today other than questions and answers. So David posted here why some API requires only a URL with a key. And that's it. Some require cURL with difficult to remember options. Okay, let me help describe that a little bit. And cURL has nothing to do with the requirements. The API is going to require various things. Some of them it might require a parameter. It might not. It might require authorization, either a bearer token or basic type, or an API might require certain headers or optional headers, and depending if it's a GET or a POST, it may or may not require a body of some sort, either a JSON payload or form field. So that's what the API requirements are. How you do that, you can do that with insert from URL in FileMaker, or you can do that in the terminal using cURL. That's the difference. Now, the cURL options is something that FileMaker has added to the insert from URL script step in order to you to pass in some of this API optional things like bodies and headers and authorizations. Now, you can't do that in straight insert from URL. The only thing you can provide is just a URL. So the cURL options allow you to add additional parameters to your insert from URL that allows you to do some more complex API work. I hope that clarifies the difference between why API seems to require just a key and credentials, and some requires cURL with the difficult to remember options. So that's kind of the answer. It all depends upon the API call, how much security there is, how many different options there are, and what type of request you're trying to do, whether you're trying to just send something or whether you're trying to request data and you need to put in a query. I mean, every system's different. So hopefully that answers David's question.
There was also a question from Lynn. What is the n/n in the ChatGPT response?
Those, the \n, that is an escaped return key or new line character. So I think a \r or c is a carriage return, and the \n is a new line, something like that. So that would be synonymous in FileMaker with a pilcrow, which is your option 7.
I don't see any other comments. Mostly excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff, actually. Yeah. So is next week going to be a follow-on to this? Is it going to be a postal
Next week
person?
is an add-on about JSON arrays, I think.
Basically, this week's kind of wraps up the whole JSON with DataAPI series that I've been going on with cURL options and DataAPI and execute DataAPI, and PostMan is a tool to help you with APIs. We've exhausted the API topic at this point. But all of it has been exploring and using JSON, which is where we started several weeks back, right? So
yes, no, this has been awesome, and I think everyone who has come has agreed this is really awesome.
Good.
We always get really high attendance for these days. That being said, I think I'm going to ruminate us towards freedom.
Yeah, ruminate towards freedom. All right, cool. Thanks, Margaret. I appreciate it. Good job, Leland. Really
Thank
good
you.
job.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Everyone have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.